I'll keep this short. I came here for 2 reasons. 1, to praise you, Kamaru. You're an absolute legend. And 2, Henry, how'd you let Aljo take you down so easy? You're welcome!
Oh, shit. Did we lose him? First and foremost,
I think he did that.
Sean,
hey, he got us. Hey, he got us, Kamaru. He didn't just do that to me. He did that to us.
Alright, so ever since Henry Cejudo came out of retirement, this guy has just taken L after L after L, both in and out of the UFC octagon, and he's for sure damaged his legacy permanently as a result, because since returning to active competition, this guy has lost 2 out of 2 fights in the UFC, and after watching Sean clown Henry on his own podcast and seeing Henry get visibly irritated with being made the butt of the joke, I really can't help but feel this guy made a massive mistake in coming back. And seeing as I think it's very likely that he retired as a ploy to negotiate a better contract from Dana, the fact that he's now fighting at a base payout of $50,000 less than Mackenzie Dern shows to me that Henry really overplayed his position and fumbled the bag massively. But before I talk about how Henry's career has spiraled into a place of abject disappointment, I think it's important to clarify how on top of the world this guy was prior to abruptly retiring. Yes, he lost 2 fights in a row against Mighty Mouse and Joseph Benavidez, but since those losses, the guy went on a 6-fight win streak, and the last 4 of those wins were against top-tier competition. At UFC 227, he won the flyweight belt in a rematch against Demetrius Johnson, and even though on the night of the fight I scored it for DJ, it was still a really close fight where Henry showed that he was a top-tier fighter. Then Henry followed up this win by finishing EPO TJ Dillashaw in 32 seconds, where TJ walked into the fight as a pretty sizable betting favorite. Cejudo then moved up in weight to fight for the vacant bantamweight title against Marlon Moraes, who I understand has become a bit of a meme in present day, but at the time Marlon was probably the scariest guy in the division. And after battling through a really tough first round where Henry got beat up, he came back and outstruck Marlon and finished him in the third. And in Cejudo's last fight before retiring, he kinda schooled Dominic Cruz, where he finished Cruz in the second round, made Dominic throw a temper tantrum in the cage, and Dominic has been coping about this loss ever since. All this to say, Henry was on top of the MMA world when he unexpectedly retired after beating Cruz, and during his speech in the octagon, he claims that it was so he could spend more time with his family. But immediately after Henry announced his retirement, both fighters and reporters speculated that this was a ploy so that he could negotiate a higher paying contract out of the UFC. Before the event even ended, John Jones outright claimed that this was Henry trying to make a play for more money. Michael Bisping piled on and sarcastically tweeted that this was the best contract negotiation ever. Then Ariel Helwani spilled some insider information and claimed that after beating Moraes, Henry wanted to get paid way more and was refused, and he wondered if Henry's retirement was a result of being unhappy with how much money he was making. In fact, media members were so immediately suspicious that Henry retiring was a contract negotiation tactic that in the post-fight press conference they asked him if this was just a ploy, and Henry straight up says he'd be willing to come back if he got paid more.
Is there anything that would make you reconsider? I mean, if Dana comes to you and says, wait a minute, let's fatten up this check a little bit. You know, all the cringe is working. People are buying into the king of cringe. We need you around.
Yeah, he knows the number. He knows the number. And but I really do want to walk away. But like I said, man, money talks. Money talks. But I'm happy with the UFC. You know, I want to start that new chapter in my life. And, you know, I could never do that as a kid that was raised by a single mother. I could never fight and try to raise a family because I know what it takes, man. And I know that I'm very selfish to myself. Like I said, rightfully so. So
Now, to be fair, Henry did emphasize that he wanted to become more of a family man, but based on his response, it's pretty clear to me that his retirement wasn't a definitive closing of the door to his career. The guy straight up called out Dana for more money, so I think it's more than fair to say that this could have been a negotiation tactic from Henry. And honestly, if you're asking me, I think it was probably a little bit of both. He probably did want to take a break from fighting for a little bit so he can be there to raise his child, but I also think that Henry always planned to come back to fighting, and he saw this as an opportunity to try to get Dana to pay him more. And although I totally understand why this guy would want to take time away from competition and be there for his family, retiring from the sport while he was at the very top of the mountain and also in his prime, only to return 3 years later, is an insanely risky move, and knowing what we know now, I think Henry's plan might have backfired on him a little bit. Because when Henry returned to the octagon nearly 3 years to the day after beating Dominic Cruz to face Aljamain Sterling at UFC 288, this was Henry's Hail Mary opportunity for his plan to come come to fruition. I know a lot of you guys weren't, but I was really excited to see Cejudo make his return. I do think that even if he wasn't able to win his belt back, he makes bantamweight a lot more interesting, even just as a top contender. And even though Cejudo fought a really good fight against Sterling, it just wasn't good enough, and he lost a close split decision where I personally agree with the judges on this one. But the thing is, on the topic of money, in spite of the loss, it seems like Cejudo likely was paid more in this fight than any of his other fights prior. Now, the Nevada State Athletic Commission is super lame and doesn't release full fight purses anymore, but if my super sophisticated Google research is at all accurate, I've seen some publications estimate that Henry made $500,000, $732,000, and one report estimates that Henry made $1.03 million. And obviously with a range like this, who knows what he actually got paid, because honestly he could have made less than $500,000 and he might have even made more than $1.03 million, but I doubt it. I will say though, I think the idea of Henry getting paid anywhere between $500k to $750k seems very believable to me, but even if he made $400k, which definitely seems low given the magnitude of his return, this still would have been his biggest payday in his entire career. But the thing is though, Henry lost. And because he lost, there's just no way that Dana in the UFC would continue to pay Henry this amount of money if he's not the champion. And in the universe where Henry got the win over Aljo, he probably would have been making more money than whatever he got paid against Aljo to keep defending his belt as the champion, but obviously in order for that to happen, it was vital that he won this fight, and he just didn't. By losing this fight, Henry quite literally fumbled the bag, and his most recent payout from the UFC proves that. Because after making such a risky bet on himself by retiring as a champion, sidelining himself for 3 years, then returning to the modern-day bantamweight division just to lose to Aljo, it's clear that his bet didn't pay off, seeing as in his most recent fight against Merab Dvalishvili at UFC 298, Henry got paid just $150,000 in base pay. And 150 G's is a ton of money for somebody like me, but for context, this is $200,000 less than his base pay in his championship fights against Dillashaw, Moraes, and Cruz. But for further context, Henry got paid 50 G's less at UFC 298 than Mackenzie Dern. Holy shit. I mean, I really can't shake the feeling that Henry's massive pay decrease is a form of punishment from Dana and the brass for trying to strong-arm them the way that he did. Because although I do obviously think that Henry should be getting paid less while he doesn't have a title or if he's not fighting for titles anymore, him getting paid less than Mackenzie Dern, who barely knows how to throw a punch after being a professional fighter for 8 years, is insane. And you might be saying that Mackenzie may attract more viewers because of her assets, but Henry is one of the very few fighters in history to hold 2 UFC belts simultaneously, so the fact that he's getting paid less than her seems more like Dana seeking retribution than anything else. Henry's more accomplished than Dern, and he's just a better fighter than her too, so again, I really get the feeling that Dana shafted Henry for overreaching. Look, I will always respect people for making a bet on themselves regardless of the circumstances or situation, and although I admire Henry for taking such a huge risk in pursuit of a huge goal, I really think that he overplayed his position by retiring and coming back when he did. Of course, it's easy for me to say this because hindsight is 20/20, but looking back at the sequence of events, I feel like Henry should have either kept fighting after beating Dominic Cruz so as to avoid getting passed up by his competition, or honestly, he should have just stayed retired. And I understand that Henry had faith in his skills and felt confident enough that he could jump back into the shark tank that is the bantamweight division, but in the 3 years that he was gone, 135 became one of the most competitive weight classes in the UFC, with killers lurking around every corner. I'm sure that Henry was still actively training during his retirement, but given how rapidly the other bantamweights improved while also having the additional benefits of actually fighting in the octagon, whatever lead Henry had over the other 135ers was lost. And given maybe Henry wasn't actually that far ahead of the pack in the grand scheme of things, a lot of people, including myself, still believe Mighty Mouse deserved the win in their rematch. TJ was a dehydrated husk of a man when Henry TKO'd him, Marlon followed up his loss to Henry by going 1-7 in his next 8 fights, and Dominic Cruz was well past his prime and leapfrogged Petr Yan when he got his title shot against Cejudo. So maybe Henry's double champ run wasn't as impressive in actuality as it appears to be on paper. I mean, don't get me wrong, anytime a person can become a double champ is an astonishing achievement, and to Henry's credit, he actually did defend both of his belts. But in hindsight, I'm personally not too sure how much stock we should be putting in some of his championship wins at both 125 and 135 anymore. And after an entire lifetime of defying the odds and overcoming monumental challenges like winning the Olympics and holding 2 UFC titles simultaneously, I can totally see why Henry thought he was able to pull off this scheme to get paid more. But honestly, winning an Olympic gold medal and becoming a double champion is much easier than getting Dana White to pay you more. But to be fair to Henry, he really did almost pull this all off. If one more singular judge in the Aljo fight fight, scored it his way, he would have pulled off one of the most incredible business moves a UFC fighter has ever made. He was close, but no cigar. And seeing as things have played out the way that they did, I think it's a damn shame that Henry wasted his prime athletic years in hopes that his plan would work out the way that he expected, because we probably would have seen him in some pretty great fights if he didn't put himself on the bench. Who knows, if he stayed active, he might have been able to defend his belt against the likes of Petr Yan, Corey Sandhagen, or Jose Aldo. It would have been a tall order to beat any of those guys in 2020, much less all three of them, but he had a much higher chance at beating them in 2020 than he does now in 2024 at 37 years old. Honestly, I kinda think that if Henry fought Aljo in 2020, he probably would have had a better shot at beating him than when they actually fought in 2023, but I guess we'll never know. And let's be real, even if Henry didn't retire but lost his very next title defense against, say, Petr Yan or Aljamain Sterling, I feel very strongly that he'd be getting paid more than $150,000 per fight. I mean, even amongst other fighters in the present-day landscape of the UFC, Henry seems to have lost the respect of his peers. Don't get me wrong, fighters have always made fun of Henry, oftentimes for good reason, but nowadays a lot of them treat him like he's a joke. Obviously, you have Sean O'Malley clowning Henry on his podcast from earlier this week, and after losing to Aljo, Conor McGregor posted a video where he's totally not on cocaine, mocking Henry for the way that he was fighting.
Okay, Henry, this one's for you, my man, right? Some of the things, oh my God, you blew my... I couldn't believe what I was seeing, right? So you were here like this, right? And you were doing this, and I was like, you were doing this little thing, and I was like, what the fuck is that? I've never seen nothing like it. This guy is a fucking genius, yeah? So you were doing this really well, yeah? If you'd have just done it this way, man, you're a fucking clean shot, bro!
Then just yesterday, Song Yadong has called out Henry for ducking him, claiming that Henry has been faking injuries as a means to avoid matching up against him. I don't know, I kind of feel bad for Henry for all of this happening, but at the same time, this is the risk that he ran when he took as big of a gamble as he did. I guess in a sense, he brought it upon himself, because in Henry's pursuit of making more money, he gave up his accolades, and it not only resulted in him making less money than fighters who are inferior to him, but he's also the furthest away from capturing UFC gold since like 2016. But hey, sometimes in life, when you swing, you miss. And in the case of Henry, he took a big swing, and unfortunately for him, he just barely missed. But as a result, the damage to his legacy will probably never be repaired. But hey, God loves a trier, am I right? Anyways, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about Henry's big play at trying to get paid more money. Do you think he should have kept fighting or just stayed retired like I do? Or do you think it was a smart move for him to come back, even in spite of how things have gone for him since returning to the game? As always, if you liked the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.